And I promised Perry that I would tell you how I kind of sort of backed into this. Sometime in January, I think it was, I was communicating via email with Christina about Heart of America business. We have a connection through that. And at the end of an email, I threw out, you really ought to put together a collection of poetry inspired by, the Urantia book. And she shot back, good idea, go ahead. Well, I've been a member of enough organizations, committees and such, that I should have seen that one coming. But while I was still staring at that email, trying to collect my wits, she sent me another email. And I opened it up, and it was one of your poems, Bruce. And being the avid fisherman that I am, I immediately recognized it for what it was, a worm dangling on a hook. So I began thinking about it and playing around with ideas, titles, and so forth. I had a backlog of 4 or 5 mini messengers that I hadn't gotten around to reading. Well, I began reading them, and then I pulled out all of the poems that I found in those issues, and that's where I pirated much of your material. Then I sent it to Christina not long ago, and you'll see it in just a moment. And we set up a phone call. And while we were on the phone, she sent me a number of emails with other poems. Dave Holt, as 1 or 2 of yours, David. And so I've incorporated them into this. We have one person from Denmark, Jean Asher. I will be talking with her probably alone some morning or early afternoon. Right now it's just 1:30 in Denmark. So that's how all of this came about.
And this is what?
This is Sailing Towards Salvington. Poetry inspired by the 5th epical revelation. And I won't bore you with, all of the different variations in the title I tried, and it kept coming back to this one. Why the 5th epical revelation as opposed to your Urantia book? I really want this to be as broad as possible. And a lot of people, I can almost imagine this being in a bookstore, someone picking it up and, poetry inspired by the Urantia book. Well, that's not, very inspiring, but the 5th epical revelation, holy cow, what the heck is that? So they pick it up and they open it up, and that's the first step in getting people to purchase. So first of all, I do not have permission. At this point, I haven't sought permission to use any of the artwork in this volume. I initially thought of the art, as well as its obvious visual merits, as a way to increase the width of the book, sufficiently to make perfect binding work. And it gives it a more professional feel and increases its value. I don't want to saddle stitch work, okay? And of course, all of this is going to increase the cost, but we'll talk about that later. Salvington, as opposed to Paradise or other things, non-readers of the Urantia book will get the religious and poetic implications of salvation, even if they don't recognize Salvington as a place as we do. I'm also a fan of Gary Tong's work. Some of you might recognize this as Gary's. You've seen examples of his work in or on the cover of the Herald and other Urantia-related publications. I played around with half a dozen of his paintings, but always sensed this one was pretty much a no-brainer for the title. Whether we use this art or any of the art included thus far will depend upon whether or not we decide to go with other art and also getting permission. So the order of the poems means very little here. It's basically the order that I either received them or pirated them off of copies of the Mini Messenger. The Errol, you'll recognize your one-line poem up there. Errol sent me that in an email recently. I'm not sure I want a whole lot of one-liners, but this one's so good, I couldn't pass it up. And as I look at this page, I don't like the way it sits with the art. I think I'd really prefer this art on a page by itself if we use it. And I really don't want to put I don't want to put multiple poems on a.
Can I interrupt just for a minute, Dwayne? I just want to get a sense of our agenda, what you plan to cover and how much time, just so I have some idea of what we're doing today. What's the scenario? Do you mind?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe 45 minutes to an hour.
And
what I want,
what do you plan to do at that time?
My intention is to show you what I have so far and kind of narrate through it a little bit to give you some idea of what I have in mind. And it will change. It will expand, and you could ask questions, and I think you'll discover a lot of those questions that you came in here with will be answered as I go along.
But just from a more general question, is your intent with us to see if we'd be interested in contributing our work to this book? Is that where we're headed? And that's why you're showing it to us?
That's part of it. And if you, for example, if you've already bought into it, you're going to want to have some idea of what it's going to look like, where I'm going with it, and so forth. And so I'm, going to be answering those questions. This is a 3-page poem, the first page of a 3-page poem by Errol. And I think I'm going to suggest that we not use poems more than 3 pages long for now. Although I will be open to letting anyone make their case. for longer poems. The
I missed that. We not use what?
I would prefer that we not use poems more than 3 pages long.
Okay.
But if you have a poem longer than that, it probably wouldn't take a whole lot of arm twisting. I would prefer to have more poems included. Okay. And this poem, My Hour Has Come, I think is a painting commissioned by Mo Siegel as part of his painting project. I have a hunch that Mo might veto the use of any of those paintings. Nevertheless, if we decide to go with art on the inside, I will approach him. As long as I do it long distance, what can he do? He can't slap me. Although I don't think I would do that anyway.
I had asked him about use some of this artwork for one of the particular poems that I ended up making a video out of, and he was willing to let me use it. It turns out it didn't fit my needs, but he was very approachable and generous.
It gives visibility to what he's doing. I think it would just be a matter of whether or not he thought it would be premature. I don't know his thinking along that line. Bruce is very much into structuring his poems. This is going to be a 6x9, not a 5x8 or anything like that. I noticed a number of you write long lines. A smaller book of 5x8 would compromise the integrity of line breaks. Although some of that is probably going to be inevitable. This poem, I think, I use InDesign on a Mac, and so I can't tell you for sure because this is a PDF, but I may have fudged on the kerning for this poem in order to maintain the integrity of the look of the poem. It may be 90% instead of 100% in terms of the spacing between characters. Okay, and even with the 6x9 format, we will have some squeezing take place.
May I interrupt a second? I can share some experience with that. In my book, we had the same problem, and I had to rewrite. It alternates between angelic host talking, which is written in the poetic style, and then the usual novel style. And so I had to physically go through all the poems and cut them and reshape them to fit the size of the page of the book, because I couldn't use 8.5 by 11, which makes that's an expensive book, and it's also it's just cumbersome. My book is smaller than that. The second thing I wanted to point out, just as comment as it goes by, is as I grow older, I find myself writing more and more just 2-page poems. And the reason for that is that when the pages are open in a book, you see the whole poem in front of you. There's no page turning. There's no interruption of thought, and of course visually is as important as anything else. So,
and I will try to do that as much as I can. That will be an important factor in terms of arranging the poems. Subject matter may have something to do with it. In terms of ordering poems, I don't really have a lot of confidence in my ability to do that well. And some of you will have the opportunity to help me out with that, challenge me on things and so forth. But yes, when there is a 2-page poem, my first thought will be to try to keep them together. Might not always be possible. Let's see, you notice on this is the second, on the left hand side, this is the second page of Perry's 2-page poem. Okay, so even here, you know, I've broken that rule, but I'm not too concerned about that right now. Well, but what I've done, I've included art at the bottom, and I'm conflicted about this. I like white space. I'm highly prejudiced against putting more than one poem on a page, for example, and I'm comfortable with silence, both audio and visual. This defeats part of my purpose of using art to simply lengthen the book, as well as break up the monotony of page after page of text. Okay, and there's a lot of arguments both ways there. So I can go through, you know, this. I think the tender loving care, I think that's one of the poems commissioned by Mo. I know Sloa, there's actually, you probably saw another poem by hers, the Lighthouse at Alexandria.
Wayne,
Yes.
Wayne, could I just say, the way that you've laid this one out, this Birds Over your poem here, that would work for any of mine that that instead of having it flip the page, have them both like what this one is.
And that, yeah, and that will be my preference. As I say, it might not always be possible. And when it's not possible, it could be that I may take one of my poems, and I don't have a lot of poems that are 2 pages, but I may take one of my poems and do that, so that none of you have to suffer with regards to that. So what
excuse me, I just want to mention, I put a lot of my short little poems to photographs that I've taken. And so for what it's worth, I have quite a few of those, and obviously short, but if you want to see any of those, I'm happy to send them to you. I've got it, being a photographer as well as a poet, it's kind of natural to do that anyway.
Yeah, and I've got paintings too that might go with things.
Okay.
Like that one that you can see above the piano. You can't see it very well, but it's anyway. And there's another one. They're all over the place. But if that's something that fits too.
Here's one. I don't know if you can see it, but
a little bit is kind of hard to make it out.
anyway, that's what I'm just giving you a sense of the kind of thing that I do with the little line saying, and then the image and blah, blah, blah.
Okay. So what poets to include? How many poets to include? Oh, a frog. Yes. That might be my neighbor. But I currently have 10 poems, 10 poets. I don't have contact info for one, and I want to talk with Christina about whether or not to include him. I have questions in that regard. David Glass.
So
What?
how big do you anticipate this book being? How many pages roughly?
We can maybe get into that with the cost. I do want
Okay.
to mention that. David Glass, you suggested another poet. And I will have you reach out to that poet if you decide to. Trust in your judgment. And if there are other poets of note not included thus far, I want to know. Just this morning, Christina mentioned Byron Belitzos to me as someone who had actually put out his own volume of poetry, which, you know, I was unaware of that. Of course, I think many of you know Byron from his prose.
Well,
Evolution of the Soul, I think, is one.
I was involved in that. There was a book of poetry published. Byron's is in, I'm in it, and some, but it was really headed up by Clyde Bedell. I don't know if any of you know Clyde, but he wrote the first Concordex, which was the only way we could reference passages, and
Yeah.
and so he put together a book. I think I have it somewhere, badly beaten up. It's called Ardent Ascent, and Byron was very involved in that project. And there's some other poets that I don't remember. I have to find it. Anyway, so that was the first of this sort of thing, and that was probably in the 70s, early 80s, I'm guessing.
Okay, Ardent Ascent. I know you mentioned that in one of your emails. I will see if I can find that.
Yeah, it'd be good.
If not, I may come back to you and see if I can get you to mail it to me. Although I really don't want to do that, but I am interested in that.
Well, Byron has a copy too. I only have just the one copy, but anyway, might be worth checking it out.
Okay, so but on the other hand, you know, I'm not interested in getting as many poets as I want. I'm really more interested in quality than inclusivity. If you'll forgive me for that, if some poet gets angry with me at the 2023 convention for overlooking him or her, then that becomes an argument for a second volume. In any event, I want to manage manageable number of cats, if you'll excuse me, to herd, or poets to herd. Although I was an editor for a small town newspaper and recently was president of a statewide writers group here in Kansas Authors Club. So I do have, you know, think of that, okay, a statewide organization of writers. I do have some experience in herding cats. I'm wanting to begin by asking each of you to send me 5 poems. And you can give me tacit permission. I stole these poems from you that you're seeing right here. Okay, so you can give me permission to use these, or you can say, you know, I don't want to use, I don't want that one in the volume. I'd rather have, you know, 5 others. That's okay. And I will send you this. Okay, I will attach this to an email so you can look at it. But please, you know, be very cautious about who you sell it, or who you show it to, because I'm especially concerned about the art. I just do not have permission for the art, and it may never appear in the book. So what does that mean? Some of you may not have 5 poems, but if you all have 5 poems, how big is it? I guess at that point, it's getting up there between 68 to 76 pages. My preference, to answer your question, Perry, is to have a volume closer to 98, 102 pages, just to have a bulk to it that makes it easier to perfect bind.
Are you planning to use like Amazon publishing or something like that? Or are you going to just, how's that going to work? What do you have in mind?
Okay, actually, yeah, we're ready for that right now. And I'm really sorry that Christina couldn't make it. Christina right now is teaching violin lessons and also writing a grant report, which I'm surprised she's only doing 2 things at once. I would expect her to be doing 3 or 4 things. She's, I'm kidding. Christina is awesome, in case you don't know her. But when we talked over the phone, she said, first of all, we can get a second Myler grant. A second Myler grant, I believe, would be about $2,500. David Glass, you may know more about that than me, but if I understood Christina correctly, it typically costs them about $3,500 for 2,000 copies of a 52-page publication. Those are her numbers. And when she says a 52-page publication, I'm pretty sure she's talking about a standard size page, magazine, size. Okay. This one's, it actually says it's 42 pages, which surprises me. The cover must be part of that. I don't know. But anyway, of course, as you probably are aware, it has to be in multiples of 4. Well, it's not going to cost that much probably for a 6x9 size. Okay. But I have no idea exactly how much it's going to cost. I think once we have about 5 poems from each of you, then we'll be at a point where we can send it to Christina and she can run it through her sources and find out what the cost is going to be. So the 2,000 copies, it wouldn't have to be 2,000 copies, it could be less. Her calculus envisions completing this in time for the 2023 convention.
So you actually want to print these? Because like I have a children's poem book, storybook on Amazon, and we don't pay anything until, if they sell, we get paid, but there's no out-of-pocket printing expense. But am I hearing you that you want to actually have printed books in hand at a conference?
I'm quite prepared to go through, Amazon or some of those other companies like that, as I have in the past. But in connecting with Christina, she's talking about having enough on hand for people to have or purchase during the 2023 convention.
Mm-hmm.
So, to be honest, yeah, if we could get the second Myler grant to pay for publishing a large number, I would go with that. Otherwise, we can do the print on demand route. That's one of the very important questions that I don't have answers for, and maybe sometime in the future we can get together with Christina here and she can talk more about that.
Where is the 2023 convention? Do you know yet, or do we know?
When and where is it's going to be?
Where? Yeah, where?
It's going to be in the Chicago area. My
Oh.
understanding is it's going to be about the same time, same month, and same place as this year's,
Oh,
which is there in the Chicago area. And I think that's July. So when that's going to be.
now they used to have them every 3 years, the international. Is this that, or is this something else?
I'm not clear
Okay,
about that.
all right.
You know, I'm at this point with respects to this part, I'm channeling Christina.
Okay, no problem.
So, and it apparently would be a major event if she's talking 2,000 copies. Okay, as I said, that's her number. Okay. So yeah, I don't think the fellowship generally does it. I don't think the fellowship generally goes the POD route. That, you know, I have a couple of books out. And I, published them myself. Here's a volume of poetry, Evolution's Promise. I played on the title of the book Evolution's Purpose with that. And then a work of fiction that I wrote, Herald of the Resurrection, about a messenger who had been a messenger working for the temple, who had been spying, quote unquote, on Jesus and was so blown away that David Zebedee recruited him to become a messenger for his service. He became David's inside man at the temple. So that's, yeah, I'm plugging myself here anyway. So we're at about 45 minutes. Let me get rid of that. And did we lose? We lost someone. We lost David, and I'm not sure when. But so that's what I've got right now. Any questions?
What I sent you is a culling of some of my poetry, and it's way more than 5, I'm afraid. But if you want to check through and see which ones strike you, just a little point, the Future of Death poem that you had already included, I have edited slightly in the new sending, so that's a different, slightly different. If these books are sold at the 2023 convention, that monies goes to?
I don't know.
Yeah, all the rich poets are.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's my personal preference would be to have a volume in which we could sell and make money as poets. How often does that happen, right? But that's the best case scenario. What's really in the back of my mind in terms of my own vested self-interest is I've thought for several years now putting out a second volume of my poetry, and I might do that and time it to come out at about the same time as this one, and then have it at the convention and sell it in conjunction with with Sailing Towards Salvington. And I hope you're okay with that title. I recently just wrote a poem in which I included the line, the phrase "sailing toward Salvington" in it. But I don't know. I was a little bit confused about that when I talked with Christina, and I was kind of hoping that she would be here tonight, so some of you guys could put her on the spot and ask some of those questions, which as she just found out, I wasn't able to answer adequately. So yeah, I don't know if you were watching real carefully, you noticed that there was an ISBN code included at the front. That's mine. Okay. It might it might end up with the fellowship owning this book and using their own ISBN, for the book. So.
Well, I don't have any questions. I appreciate you taking the time to facilitate this, Dwayne. Keep up the good work. I'll look for a few poems to send your way. Personally, the title doesn't speak to me, but then I'm just one voice, and I know you put time into it, and I understand titles. I actually have a file of over 350 titles that I've come up with over the years that I think, well, someday I'll use some of them, maybe. Anyway, so titles. Well, anything else? Any questions for me? Otherwise, I'm going to see you all soon and find out how it evolves. And I'm glad to meet you and Perry, I guess, again.
Yeah.
And Bruce, and may we continue to pronounce words trippingly over the tongue.
Okay. Thank you, Errol. And we'll see you. And I'm going to stop recording right now.